Hello again and welcome to a new video. This is the video about relative clauses part 2. Objectives. First, we're going to review what relative clauses are. We're going to differentiate the relative clauses, and finally we're going to use them in sentences. In the last video, we said that relative clauses are complex sentences that are used to join two sentences or give more information. I bought a new car, it is very fast, can sound better saying I bought a new car that is very fast. In this case, we're using that as the relative pronoun to have a more complex sentence. Remember that the relative clauses start with some relative pronouns that are the same as the WH question words, which for things and animals, who for people, that for things, animals, and people, where for places, why for reason, who's for owner, and when for time. Types of relative clauses. In group number 1, we have the defining and non-defining relative clauses, and in group number 2, we have relative clauses as subject pronouns and also relative clauses as object pronouns. In the first video, we talked about the relative clauses in group number 1. Now we're going to talk about the relative clauses in group number 2. Defining relative clauses as subject pronouns. These relative pronouns go before a verb and refer the previous subject. For example, I am looking for a secretary who or that, remember that we can use any of these two pronouns, can use a computer well. So we can say, I'm looking for a secretary who can use a computer well, or I am looking for a secretary that can use a computer well. In the second example, she has a son who is a doctor, or she has a son that is a doctor. We bought a house which is 200 years old, or we bought a house that is 200 years old. So notice here that the subject pronoun who refers to the previous noun, and after the subject pronoun who or that, we have a verb. In this case, is the modal verb can. In the second example, who or that, the modal verb is. And in the last example, which and that, the modal verb is. Something else that you need to consider is that the verb that we use after the pronoun must have accordance with the plural or singular. For example, son is singular, so we need to use a verb in singular. House is singular, we need to use a verb in singular. We can use it in plural. We bought 2 houses which are 200 years old. So in this case, we change how for houses, and the verb that we need to use is are. Let's see how we use these relative clauses in examples. So in the first example, we want to put these two ideas together. She worked for a man. The man used to be an athlete. The sentence is going to be, she worked for a man who used to be an athlete. So we're using who because we're talking about a person.
Phonology.
Number 2, they call a lawyer. The lawyer lived nearby. They call a lawyer who lived nearby. Again, we're talking about a person. Notice here we have who and then we have the verb. Number 3, we broke the computer. The computer belonged to my father. We broke the computer that belonged to my father, or you can also use which belonged to my father. Number 4, I hope you're trying to do these exercises before you check the answer. I dropped a glass which was new, or that was new. Notice here, glass is singular, so the verb is singular. The man is in the garden. The man is wearing a blue jumper. The man who is in the garden is wearing a blue jumper. So notice here that we have a subject relative clause and also a non-defining relative clause. We can say the man is wearing a blue jumper, or the man who is in the garden is wearing a blue jumper. So in this case, I am not considering this information to be important or relevant for my sentence, so I am using the commas because it's the only man in the garden. So notice here how we can use the relative clauses from the two groups in the same example. Now, defining relative clauses as object pronouns. It goes before a noun and can be dropped. She loves the chocolate which or that I bought. We went to the village which that Lucy recommended. And John met a woman who or that I had been to school with. So notice here that when we use a defining relative clause as object pronoun, after the object pronoun we don't have the verb anymore. Now we have a subject. I, Lucy, I. And also the pronoun refers to the previous noun. In the first case we're talking about chocolate, so we're using which or that. In the second case, we're talking about a village, so we can use which or that. And in the last example, we're talking about a woman, we can use who or that. And something else that can happen here is that you cannot use any of this. Now let's read the sentences again. She loves the chocolate I bought. So you can see that these two words are not necessary. We went to the village Lucy recommended. Not necessary. John met a woman I had been to school with. It is not necessary when we have relative clauses as object pronouns. The last example, the university which that she likes is famous. So we can delete this, and the university she likes is famous. Now let's do some exercises. Please keep in mind that you can use or not these relative clauses. We ate the fruit. I bought the fruit. Notice here how we are repeating the word fruit. So the relative clause is going to help us to avoid redundancy. We ate the fruit that I bought, or you can say we ate the fruit I bought. Example number 2. He lost the money. I had given him the money. So in this case, we're repeating the word money here, money here. So the answer is going to be like this. He lost the money that I had given him. Or he lost the money I had given him. Number 3. We call the taxi company. Julie often uses the taxi company. Again, we're repeating taxi company. We call the taxi company that Julie often uses, or we call the taxi company Julie often uses. John met a girl. I used to employ the girl. Repeating girl. And now we have John met a girl who I used to employ. Okay, now let's differentiate who, the subject pronoun, the relative pronoun who, with subject pronouns, relative clauses, and object pronoun relative clauses. The man who lived next door was very friendly. Notice here in the subject we had here the verb, who is an obligatory element in this sentence. And now in the object, the man who we met was very friendly. Remember, this can be or cannot be in the sentence because it's not mandatory. And we is the subject. The man we met was very friendly. Who is an optional element. It is the object of the subordinate clause. Now with which. This is the bank which was robbed yesterday, which refers to the subject and is an obligatory element, while in the object pronoun, which can be there or not, because we have a subject, in this case is they, which can be omitted because it is the object of the subordinate clause. So, in other words, para reconocer cuando tenemos un relative clause como subject pronoun, tenemos que fijarnos que después del subject pronoun venga un verbo. En cambio, cuando sea objeto, después del object pronoun va a venir un sustantivo. Esa es la forma más fácil de diferenciar la una de la otra. Important facts about relative clauses. Who is more common than that for people? That is more common than which for things. And people often leave out who and that, especially in relative clauses as object pronouns. The example that we just checked. And common errors. Don't use pronouns that repeat ideas in relative clauses, like Janet has a company that makes toys. You cannot say company that it makes toys, because company and it refers to the same thing. She's a friend that I met through Mike. You cannot say friend that I met here through Mike. So here again is referring to friend, so you are repeating. Thank you so much for your attention. I hope you enjoyed this video. Bye bye.